Hi everyone, this is Diva from Blood Hunter, and you're listening to the Metal Pit podcast.
Welcome to the Metal Pit podcast, where we delve deep into the albums and bands that shaped metal. Please visit our website, The Metal Pit, which is www.themetalpit.org, where you can find album reviews, interviews, and live show reviews. Also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Metal Pit, and on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com at The Metal Pit 666. You can email me, Blake, your host here for the podcast, which is podcast@themetalpit.org, if you have any comments or suggestions, or maybe you want to be a guest on an episode. And we have an Instagram, recently created Instagram for the podcast, which is at the Metal Pit Podcast. And if you're on Spotify, look up our playlists that I just created recently too, where we feature new tracks and some few classic tracks. Now, my guest this week is Mary Zimmer, or Mary Zima, who is, of course, the host of a YouTube channel, Voice Hacks. Hi, Mary. How are you doing today?
Hello. Thanks for having me, Blake. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And actually, because I've had this website on and off kind of over the years, probably 20 years or something. And I think it was back in maybe 2009. I had you on my website. Now, I used to have a thing called Metal Maiden of the Month, so I'm kind of thinking that's what you were.
Maybe, yeah. You mentioned that, and I'm like, man, this is a long time ago now. Can you believe it? It doesn't seem like that, but
no, because I'm not even sure if I interviewed you or if my friend because I only had a few people helping me back then. I have a lot more people now. But it might have been another guy that interviewed you. But I was looking through your past bands, and Luna Mortis was the name that I remember that name. So that must have been what you were in at the time.
Yeah. Oh, no. That most certainly would have been it, because that was the only thing I was in at the time. And I would have encountered a lot of stuff through we had a really great publicist at Century Media at the time. And he was connecting us with all kinds of wonderful people like you. That's why I feel like the metal scene, we are really blessed, because the fans give it something special that I don't feel like I see as much in even bigger genres,
Yes.
And I feel like the fans create the support system, the media system, the podcast for us to have a publicist for, if they're not you guys to send it to, there's nobody. So, I mean, it's really cool how the metal scene does that. And then like years later, it's like, oh yeah. And it really connects you with people. You can remember them. Although unless in this case, it's been so long, neither one of us were like, do. Unless it's been like more than a decade, I mean, man, I cannot believe how long ago that actually was,
because I've had a few, like I had Diva Satanica was one of my Metal Maids a Month, and she's still around and doing it. And she wasn't even a singer actually when she was on my website. She was just a fan, because I was just starting out getting some people from bands. So I had her on a podcast last year, and so it was cool to have her on. And I've had, Alyssa White Gloose was a Metal Maiden of the Month, and Angela Gasso, and one of the Butcher Babies, sorry, I forget her name right now, but one of them. So it's nice to see the ones that I did interview or were on the site 15 years ago or whatever, and they're still around doing stuff. So that's great. And you're still around too, of course.
Cool. Yeah, yes, we're still here. We're hanging out. But no, it's really cool, and it's cool to see some of them come up very far from where they were, and really take their place in the scene. And I think it's fantastic,
Yes. And now you teach singing lessons on your YouTube channel, or not on your YouTube channel, but I mean through Zoom or through Skype. But you do some lessons on your Voice Hacks YouTube channel. So why did you start that channel up, or why did you start giving singing lessons? Why did you decide to do that?
Well, I had been giving lessons as a teacher off and on, because that's like your default thing that you do as a musician. When since like 2002, you know, a long time ago, since I was like an adult, but a young adult, like 18, 19 or so. And I decided, and most of that would be like at, you know, at those times, it would be in a physical music store. Like during
Yeah.
college, I worked in a music store that was in a town near the college that I would, you know, and I would do my lessons out of there. So those would be in-person things, and they're not as focused, you know. A lot of kids, a lot of also I would do a lot of like beginner piano, little kid piano lessons and
Hmm.
stuff that I wouldn't do now and haven't done for years. And I was getting a music degree in college, you know, and I studied voice and all of that, you know, and so when around I started doing online lessons around 2012 or something. Everyone's always like surprised by that, but I was doing it on Skype over like what I would regard as very slow internet speeds, but many people in the world, I have friends in Germany that still have these internet speeds. So it was good enough, though. It was still like a cable, you know, internet line and stuff. And
Yes.
so I was able to, and I was getting a lot of those clients through weird like lesson teacher finder type of sites that were existing at that time. And again, it wasn't always super niche, you know, it was just kind of more uh like whatever singing lessons, you know. And then out of I tried to make a website way before. Now there's a bunch of technology that makes this easy to do, but like about 10 years ago there wasn't, and I was trying to make a website where I did have like lesson tutorials, but where you would have to like log in and get it, and like that just didn't exist.
Yes.
Now it would be easy to go over to Kajabi or something and make something. None of that was a thing. It did not exist. And so I was actually way ahead of the time, but because of that I didn't really have an infrastructure, and I'm not like a coder or an HTML coder. Like I couldn't really, you know, I did not have the skills, I realized. And I also was new at making videos, but I had made a bunch of them, like what it was the majority of the old Voice Hacks videos. And so I wasn't prepared for like, oh, my subscribers every month, I'm going to have to, if they're paying, I have to have new videos every month.
Hmm.
And my life at that time was absolutely nuts and not stable at all. So I was like, this is not going to work. So made I just threw all the videos on YouTube and made them public. It was just like, screw it. I'll just, you know, go back to teaching, like Zoom, like there wasn't any Zoom, but Skype
Yeah.
lessons, you know, and, just throw all this stuff on YouTube and make it free, because the video quality wasn't quite subscription paywall quality as well. I realized, like,
Hmm.
I was new at them. Some of my old videos, if you guys go back, they're like literally grainy, but I actually just left them up because, you know, the information was solid, and I left them up and like disappeared. I didn't
Hmm.
do anything with them, and all of a sudden I go back, you know, one day, maybe a year or two later, and there's like 17,000-ish subscribers. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, you know, people are learning from this stuff. And so then I start learning a little bit about, I started actually watching more tutorials about like how to film a proper video. And even though my life was nuts and I was living in a temporary like apartment type thing that doesn't even, that got torn down like 3 weeks later in Los Angeles, and I filmed some of my videos in there, my first videos where I tried actual lighting and camera angles.
Hmm.
And I'm learning from like, you know, 20-year-old kids on YouTube. And I don't have a really great living situation and all this stuff. And but I'm doing it anyway, you know, and I'm still giving online lessons with my crappy laptop and using iMovie to make it. So, you know, that's really how it got started. And it was more just like out of necessity. And even then, I was actually trying to pitch some ideas to some people that I knew, some A&R people I knew from the metal community, from labels, some ideas that actually like people do on YouTube now, you know. I keep being like ahead of the time, but in a time where the technology isn't really existing to like make it feasible, you know? And so, and they were all like, I'm not sure I get it, you know? And stuff that now, like they probably have departments to tackle, you know, making, getting their video to a reaction or something, you know? At that time, people were still like, wait a minute, like, you would talk about our music and somehow it would be allowed, you know, because like there's royalty collection things. There's a lot of stuff on the back end of YouTube that makes that possible, of how you're able to use certain content and this and that legally, and the artist is getting compensated. And but at that time, you know, they didn't really know that, you know. It wasn't even like that much of a thing, so I couldn't get any of those guys on board with some of my ideas, you know. So I was pitching them some ideas and they're like, I don't understand. And I would be like, okay, never mind. So, because I'd be like, we can take all the videos from your label and promote your bands this way and have like a host and like an MTV kind of thing, but on YouTube. And like, they were just like, I don't see how that's going to work, because they were stuck in like royalties and old fashioned things and stuff. And they didn't understand how the back end of YouTube worked. So I just ended up, you know, it just keeps like, some things just keep like falling in your lap, you know. And a lot of my videos were about how to scream and sing for metal.
Yes.
And I had a niche as well, you know, so it's very specific. I think it's not just singing. When I actually did do it, I did target it. I didn't do like broader things like I might have when I was just sort of teaching. I can do all of those things, but I think you know, there's not very many people with the knowledge of metal, so I just sort of went that angle, and then it just kept falling in the lap, you know, and you just keep having to do more because you're like, okay, I have to make a living. Like, really, honestly, that's what it comes down to. It comes out of necessity, really.
Yes.
So that's kind of what happened.
Well, I just went to your YouTube channel the other day. I watched a video. I think it was 4 years old now, but you had helium and you were sucking in helium and then screaming.
Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, you know, and then that's around the time I decided to start like being a more intentional YouTuber and like making more content, if you will. Yes. Because some people that I was around suggested it a little bit. And I was like, I suppose I could try that, you know, and I just wasn't, that wasn't my intention, because I'm older, and being a YouTuber was not a thing. It's not like a career goal, you know. It didn't exist really, you know. So it was like, well, you could make some videos like this other vocal teacher, you know, or something like that. And it was like, I guess I could, you know. I guess I could try that. And my first one is still my biggest one, where I did a reaction video. Or not really, I did a breakdown. Even reactions were still kind of like new, of a Nightwish thing, you know, and I was really surprised. I was just like shocked how many views. Like, just like, all right, you actually like, I don't know. I was just like, people want this, you know. I guess you don't think people want to hear my takes on something. I guess I don't know. It wasn't like that type of environment, and I was very surprised by that. So I kind of just kept doing it, and then I started doing some goofy stuff, like content stuff, like, oh, what if I could I had the idea I could just go to the party store and be hilarious and pick up a helium balloon and do screaming into a helium balloon, just to see what that would sound like. And it was hysterical. Like, I could not stop laughing. Like, that was so hard to film, because like when those screams come out of your mouth, like Alvin and the Chipmunks, like you just start dying. You know, but I had seen those choir guys do that, right, from the King's College, because they're adults and they were singing things that were written for you know, children, boys and girls before puberty can basically hit like the same notes. So they were transposing with helium. But I was like, that's kind of a genius idea. Why not? You know?
Yes.
I mean, but so yeah, and then that gets a ridiculous amount of views. And I do some of those things, of course, to intentionally bring views to the channel, bring subscribers to the channel. But it's to get them to look at the other stuff, maybe, you know, and to learn more about things. And you have to draw people in to get them to learn.
Yes.
So you have to have both, I think.
Yes. No, excuse me. Let me just go back a long way, probably, and you've probably answered this question before. But so, what in the first place got you into metal music, or what band, or?
Well, I kind of was always looking for it, you know, and I was going to a lot of punk shows and things, and Warp tours and things, you know, back in the day, like original Warp tours, like in the 90s. And it was interesting when I first heard metal. I was like, this is where I always wanted like the punk to go, you know, but it just wasn't. I was waiting for it to go there, you know. I didn't realize I was waiting for it to go there, but I was. And it was more through like classical music. You go to college and there's all these music nerds and stuff, and you know, they're into Dream Theater and blah, blah, blah. And then somebody was like, I had like the crazy look before I was actually really super into metal. It just like compounded that because I was going to like punk shows and stuff. And so I was wearing, you know, like the plaid pants with all the straps and the belts and I actually had short, like, spiky hair. I kind of had, like, more of a Morgan Lander from Kitty, you know, like blonde, spiky hair vibe. Like that kind of a look going. Like new metal meets punk or something, you know. Like the swoopy bags at the front and the spikes in the back kind of thing. And one of my friends, there were weird networking sites in the early 2000s. And somewhere around like sophomore year of college, one of my friends was like on one of those weird sites, like something that doesn't even exist anymore, like pre-MySpace, like weird stuff, you know, like there's all kind. People don't realize there's all these like proto things that just kind of don't exist anymore. And these guys were looking for a singer, you know, for a metal band, you know, and but a female singer. And my friend, whose name was also Mary, was on this site or whatever, and they were like, "You look cool. Do you want to do singing at all?" She was like, "No." Or she had cool hair or something. She had colored her hair. And she was like, "But my other friend named Mary, who has cool hair, sings." Those criteria are very high. And they were like, "Oh, okay, cool." And she was like, "Yeah, just talk to my friend." So she gives them my email address. At that time, it was like an email address instead of a phone number. I didn't even have a cell phone, I don't think. And they were like emailing me like, "Hey, this is what we're all about." And they listed all these bands, like we're into like Nightwish and The Gathering and stuff, like a lot of European bands that, you know, in like 2001, 2002, I'd never heard of, you know. Because people don't realize, like, at that time, like, you would have been discovering a whole scene because this is not stuff that was played in America, and the internet being a minimal thing, you know, definitely being a thing, but not being at all what it is now as far as a music discovery tool. You know, I wrote these guys back and I was like, well, I know like Dream Theater and Tool, like beep, you know, I was like, but I'd be interested to hear more. You know, I like all these punk bands and these other bands, and you know, I'll check it out. And they came over to my house and showed me what they were doing. I was really like proggy metal, but me being in music school, you know, I could deal with that. And the weird, like that was more familiar to me than not. And then they, you know, asked me to be in the band. And actually my regular singing, non-opera singing wasn't really very good. But they, you know, it was good enough. You know, this is Wisconsin. The pickings are slim, thankfully. And, you know, they were about 10 years older than me, about like in their late 20s, you know. So it was good because they had good, you know, background in metal. And so they were like, listen, this is the type of stuff. And they started giving me like boxes of burn CDs. And because this is what you did at the time, you'd burn CDs and give it to somebody or make a literal mixtape, you know. And I still had tape deck in my car at that time and everything. And so they sent me like big boxes of burn CDs, like, you know, so that I could hear all these bands they were talking about that I didn't know, because I definitely wasn't going to hear them on the radio in the United States.
No.
And I was just absolutely in love. And honestly, one of the first bands that I fell head over heels in love with was Nightwish, because I think I could identify, I think Nightwish and The Gathering, you know, for me, I think I could identify those vocalists the most. I probably sounded the most like them. Certainly Tarja, because I was like, oh my God, you know, because I really couldn't rock sing well at all. I could, even though I was a fan of that, and I was definitely like the punk ass of the music department, even before I was the chagrin of my classical teachers, even before I found metal, but I was a good classical singer, and that's why I was there. And so I was like, oh, this person sounds like me, and I just didn't know that you could combine all of these things with heavy metal. I was kind of impressed by that. I was like, oh wow, there's like this screamy metal, this jazzy metal, this rappy metal, this opera metal. Like, I was very blown away, because even in the early 2000s, all of that existed. And I felt like the other rock genres were their own subgenre themselves, but they weren't doing that. You don't have opera punk. I guess you could, but you don't.
No.
And so I was like, interesting. And so it almost opened a door that I could like have some of the skills that I had. Ultimately, I changed that. I didn't opera sing in those bands, but it was interesting that I could, you know. I never really actually did much opera singing in much of my bands, but it was interesting to see that someone was, you know. So I think that's really where it all started from there. And then I was full in. It was like, hair is black, and if you don't listen to At the Gates, fuck you. You know, I was like very... Like, I was full in, totally extreme, like black clothes, black hair, totally the freak show in my rural Wisconsin college. And I was completely down with all of that. So, yeah.
And so you've been in some bands. You want to name some of the bands you've been in if anybody wants to go check you out?
So, yeah. So the bands people would know was Luna Mortis, was on Century Media. That was probably the most notable one from the late 2000s. And then I was in a band called White Empress that was on Peaceville Records. And that was interesting because the lineup, that was more like, I did do some classical singing there and screaming. It was like almost like symphonic black metal. And it had myself, a guy who had been in Cradle of Filth for a long time before that. His name was Paul Allender. And Chella Harper, who had been in Cold Chamber briefly as bassist. And Jeremy on guitar, Jeremy Cohnman, who is currently the main guitarist in London After Midnight. So, like, we had all kind of come together. And then at that time, the drummer we ended up with in the long run was a guy named Adam Sagan, who unfortunately passed away a few years after that, but he had been the drummer for Into Eternity and a few bands and stuff, Circle to Circle and some bands like that. So we had kind of like a little metal lineup for that one. And then after that, I have been like I was the guest, or I was the vocalist for a power metal band called Halion Prime for one album. So that was interesting because that was all melodic singing, which was really cool. But then after that, more recently, I've just sort of like been a stand-in or like a guest vocalist or a front person. I don't have a permanent band right now, and I really like that. I did a festival performance in Mexico with a band called Black Oil, but I was just kind of standing in as the vocalist. and that was cool. That was fun to do. They're sort of like a Brazilian groove metal band. So that was just fun, you know. But right now, it's like the world has changed a lot as far as bands go. So I'm not sure what's going to come next. You know, I'm open to whatever. But at the same time, I'm not really like searching for anything either.
Yes.
I'm very content, you know, because it's tough to be touring and be in bands and all that stuff. It's always complicated. So
Yes.
you know.
Since COVID hit, everything changed and everything's prices, gas, everything.
It's
And it's
really
hard.
wild. Yeah.
It's hard for European bands to come to North America anymore. And it's,
Yeah. Especially to the United States where the
yes.
visa fees, they have increased actually. So it's
Mhm.
getting really, really pricey and almost unrealistic, you know, for metal bands. It's a strange world. It's almost
Yeah.
like you could have an influencer tour and do stand up or something. You know, it's like if your band already blew up online, then you can have a good successive tour. So it's like very strange and a different time and a different order of doing things and different reasons for things. So yeah, who knows what the future's going to hold, because it's just there are good and bad, you know. I'm not a hater of the modern music industry at all. It's just
Mhm.
different though. It's just
Yes.
not the same. So
Yes. And you mentioned White Empress, and like I listened to a couple songs just the other day, just something to do here since I knew I was going to be talking to you. And then you just mentioned Paul Allender, and I interviewed him once, and now I'm thinking I need to go back and see if I can find my old computer because I don't have all this stuff on my current site. But I kind of think
yeah.
he was in White Empress at the time that I was interviewing him, I think, but I'll have to see if I
Yeah,
can
yeah,
find it.
yeah. He was the founder of that band, so yeah, it might have been the reason why you were interviewing him. That might have
Yes.
been the reason. Yeah.
But anyway, okay. So now I asked you, so I guess we'll get to an album, and we can get back to you later about other things if they pop up in our
Sure.
conversation. Now I let you pick the group and the album, and you picked Children of Bodom,
Mhm.
and you picked their fourth. Where did I put that? Sorry, I'm looking through my notes. Their fourth studio album, which is called Hate Crew Deathroll. Now, why did
Mhm.
you choose Children of Bodom, and why this album to talk about?
Well, you said you talk about albums that, you know, were really influential, and certainly this one was. This was like their big record, the one that really blew them off the charts. And not only did it do that, but like it's honestly fantastic start to finish. It's hooks for days, you know, where you have
Mhm.
hooks constantly every single song. And there's not a whole lot of metal records like that. There's a few, but and this one is one of them. And it was also hugely influential on, you know, the metal scene as a whole, just like keyboards, guitar playing, you know, just musicality in general. Everybody with technical skills had their eye on these guys. They also came to America a lot during this time and actually started to make headway here, which was very unusual, you know, for a band of this style, especially from Europe. And they, you know, they were doing Ozfest and a lot of really big things. And Alexi had a really big influence on a lot of guitar players and musicians, and front people and songwriters and everything. So for me personally, it was also a direct influence. I mean, I had like every shirt of theirs, which is funny because 20 years ago now I have none of them. They probably all fell to pieces, but there's so many like old Luna Mortis photo shoots where it's like either in the show or in the photo shoot I'm wearing a Children of Bodom shirt. Like I was just like a huge monster fan. And we had times to open for them locally as well, many times, like, you know, when they'd come through on tour, um, you know, as the local opener, uh, and stuff like that. We, you know, I've always got to get like very close look at the show and everything. And was really a privilege, you know, because that was their prime, absolute prime, and I think they really influenced metal as a whole. And it's crazy to think that Alexi died at the age that I am now, where I feel like more healthier than I've ever felt in my life. So that is really unfortunate, and sort of a legacy that I thought would be cool to keep perpetuating, because a lot of younger people hear it, they didn't know it, and they are surprised and they like it, you know.
Yes. Now, for me, I mentioned to you before we did this that I never really listened to Children of Bodom myself, and so this album, this is the first time I listened to the album, actually. Now, I think I do remember you talked about burning CDs. I think a friend did burn me like a mix CD of Children of Bodom one year. I probably still have it somewhere in my stuff. But I don't know, I just never got into it that much, probably just because I was listening to other bands, and, you know, back then
there's so many bands, honestly.
Like, yeah.
It's like you're only one person. You can't like get into everything.
Yes.
Honestly. I mean, I try to tell people that all the time. Like, there's just so much music, you know.
And especially like now when you have a Spotify, like you can pay $20 for a year and you can listen to any album you want now on Spotify. But back in the early 2000s or whatever, you had to pay for an album, $20 for an album. So you couldn't buy everything or listen to everything, and it wasn't on the radio. And it did start to be on.
You couldn't sit there and be like, oh yeah, Joey told me to check out that thing and just bring it up on Spotify like we can now. Like,
yes.
That you said, there's no way to there's no way to do that.
Yes. So just for anybody who maybe doesn't know, of course, I'm taking some of this information, you know, from Wikipedia or Google, because as you know, the band way more than I do. So some of the stuff might not even be accurate, so you can correct me if you don't think it is. But it says that they're a Finnish melodic death metal band. Would you call them that?
Yeah, agreed.
Because there's people, you know, everybody has their opinions, and I'm looking through some. They say, oh, they're power metal, or they're thrash metal, or they're this. They said that this album is more thrash. Like the first three are more classical influence. Would you agree with that? First three?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is definitely the heaviest, but they definitely, you know, so it's like twinged with a little more thrash, I would say. Yeah, but I wouldn't say it's like a genre shift, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they are one of the best-selling artists out of Finland, especially heavy metal. It's probably the biggest heavy metal band ever out of Finland, I'm assuming, I think.
Maybe, but I think at this point, Nightwish would definitely eclipse. Okay. I would think they would win that, but at certain times, they're certainly in their respective time. I would certainly think that in 2003, they might have been bigger than Nightwish. It was a big time for Nightwish too, but they might have been bigger. You know.
Okay, I might not have even known that Nightwish was from Finland. Probably is probably why I didn't see that. Yeah. So let's okay, now the lineup, I'm not usually I say the lineup, and I told you this before, I'm not going to try to say these names. But of course, we know the big guy.
I can say them for you here.
Go ahead.
Because I brought up I brought up the list of tracks in front of me just so I could see it. But then on the side, YouTube had the names. So at this time, it was like the original lineup. It was Alexi Laiho, the front man and guitar player. Alexander, I think it's Kuopala or something like that. And then on guitar, who actually they replaced for all the live shows for this. And then Janne Varman, the keyboard player. Henka Seppala. I don't know exactly if I'm saying that right. And then Jaska Ratikainen on drums. So Alexi, Alexander, Janne, Henka, and Jaska. But pretty quickly after this, they replaced Alexander with this guy named Roope. So I know it's like a whole mouthful, but the main guy everybody talks about is Alexi for sure. You know.
Yes, that's reading some other reviews and things and people's thoughts. So everything's about Alexi.
Yeah.
Not everything, but I mean mostly everything.
Mostly, it's his band.
Yeah.
You know, and I think sometimes he had sort of a dueling, not instruments. with Yana, the keyboard player. I think that's the second guy. I mean, they're all literally top tier, ridiculous top tier.
Yes.
So it is kind of hard to focus on one. And I think just like X Japan or some of these other real or Dream Theater or some of these other really where every person in the band is extremely technical.
Yes.
They do have their own individual fan base. I would agree. I would say each person had a lot of like their own devotees for sure. Yeah. Even though Alexi was the focus, I think it was pretty evenly spread among their fan base because of just how incredibly great they all are.
Mm-hmm. Well, I heard some awesome keyboard. Even though I don't usually listen to, even though I do listen to Dream Theater. Dream Theater is one of the few bands I listen to that has a keyboard. I just don't get into too many of those bands, but I hear it on this, and like, yeah, it's pretty. It's just reminds me of Dream Theater's keyboardists and stuff with how fast he's playing.
Yeah, and this guy Yana was the first one to do the tilted keyboard thing. Which makes more ergonomic sense, period, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But even to this day, it's kind of hard to find the right stand to do that. Like everything comes like where the keyboard is like flat like this. But he was like, no, I'm standing, you know, I should put my hands like this way, you know, flat, you know, forward, like the way that they are when you stand. And it's like, duh. But he was really the first person of note to do that, you know, and it makes sense now. But nobody was doing that, so.
Yes. Okay, well, so we'll get to the tracks on the album, and I'll let you talk the most because you know the band a lot better than I do. And I don't have anything, like I didn't have the time to go listen to all their other albums. They have 10 studio albums, so I can't compare anything to other albums like you probably can if you want to, or whatever. And you can give more technical talk on vocals and stuff that I sure can't. So we're gonna start with the first track is Needled 24/7. And so what do you think of this track?
It's super sweet, like all these songs. So are you allowed to have any audio from on your podcast, or does that mess up your licensing and stuff?
Yeah, I don't believe I can have songs on, no.
Okay, yeah, because I have like audio set up where like if I play something on my end, you would actually get it.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I think that messes up the royalty, the licensing.
Yes.
So Needle 24/7, like, you know, like all the songs on this record have a high tempo, you know, they're just like hit. Oh, sorry. Excuse me.
Bless you. Bless you.
I know. And what's cool is you start realizing like it's all harsh vocals. He doesn't sing at all. And everyone's like, oh, there's hooks in the instruments, there's a lot of hooks in the rhythm. In metal there's a lot of hooks in guitar melodies and stuff, especially melodic death metal, and the rhythm itself is a hook too, though. Alexi wrote great, like sometimes I can't understand how he, like I suck at singing and playing anything, you know. But I most guitar players cannot play as well as Alexi played, like, period. If they practice their whole life and don't ever sing, period, and don't do anything else. And then he's doing it and screaming at the same time, you know. But it's just like it opens up with, like, you know, stuff. Everything's always like double kicks, you know, like there's only one moment in this entire record where the tempo lulls. And that's it. Like, we're just out the gate, like fire right from the, you know. But Needle 24/7, I just think is a song about, to me, I don't know what it's actually about, but I think it's about like a woman, you know, because it's like, you know, being away from you is like being close, or being near you, like a foot away from you is like being closer to heaven. Then again, it's like being needled 24/7. So I think that's what that's about. But he was a great lyricist, which is really surprising because I don't want Europeans to be pissed at me, but you know damn well English is not your first language. Even
Yes.
though Finnish people are very excellent at English. I have lots of Finnish students, and they are excellent at English because only 5 or 6 million people speak Suomi. So they don't have a choice, really. Like, if they ever want to communicate with people, and most musicians kind of don't have a choice. Musicians, on top of that, are usually further better at English. And if Bodom ever wanted to be popular outside of Finland, they knew they would have to do stuff in English. And he actually wrote great lyrics in English, which is not always the case. A lot of times I hear lyrics from European bands and it's like, well, you can tell that was a bit of like a dictionary translation of maybe a concept that doesn't translate, or the Google Translate. This time they wouldn't have had Google Translate, it would have been dictionary. But actually that's why it's more impressive, and he had really good writing. So it's really cool. So I mean, but it opens up with amazing soloing, like catchy choruses. It's really catchy, even though it's screaming, because you can put a hook in the rhythm and the lyrics, and also there are hooks and little melodic singy things in the instruments. I think that's why melodic death metal always gets more popular, because there's hooks, but some of it is in the instruments. So yeah, I mean, right away, all these songs encompass that, but they don't wait. It just hits immediately. I think it opens with the keyboards, like, but I think that is like, that's Children of Bodom, they're just like, if you want like a great workout record, or like to just be like, put this on, because that's just how it's going to be. So I think, this is a personal song when we look at the words and stuff, but yeah.
Well, now for just because I said that I never listened to this album before, and I knew of the band, but I never really listened to it much, or I didn't even pay. Even the guy that gave me the CD, I probably listened to it once, but I just never got into it. So I'm kind of going into this fresh, and I didn't read about the band before. I knew of Alexi, of course. So yeah, when I heard that first song, I was kind of thinking, I wonder if he's also the singer, because I didn't even know myself. So I was surprised that he's playing the guitar like that and singing, just like you kind of mentioned there. Thinking, kind
He
of
was
thought he
like
would have had
a prodigy. Yeah, they
Yes.
were really, really young when they started originally, and that's why he was already dead and done with his career by my age now, 42. Because unfortunately he lived life really, really hard, and his organs failed. But like, they started when he was like 17 or 16. He's like a child prodigy. I mean, his shredding was good then, I don't even know how old he was when this record came out, but it's pretty phenomenal. I like, again, even now, I really can't hardly think of anybody who could like play this well and do the vocals like this at the same time. I mean, there are people out there who just have natural talent, and some of them are famous, and they're famous because of that reason. It's like they are the exception. And certainly, yeah, can you believe that he's up there doing all that at the same time?
Yes, I definitely tell how great a guitarist he is, just even on the first song there.
Yeah.
Okay, then we get to the track called. Oh,
were
sorry.
you like, was it weird though? Like I, like, reactions are cool, and so like it doesn't really sound like anything else, right? Like, there's not a whole lot of other bands that sound like this, or
No,
I can't even think of any, really.
Like, if I would have read that they're melodic death metal, I would have thought his vocals would be more, death like vocals. It's more screeching, which I know is in there too.
Yeah.
But I was, if I hear death, I'm thinking, oh, Cannibal Corpse or Death or whatever, or singing like that. So it was a little different to hear that when I first heard it. And then the first track kind of starts off with some thrash kind of riffs and stuff. But then the keyboards, I'm not sure there's a whole lot of keyboards on the first track, but I noticed it on later songs, and that kind of surprised me actually too. With that and the playing, like we mentioned before, about how good they are.
Yeah,
with the
exactly.
playing too. but yes, I don't know if they really do. I mean, sure, there's some riffs will sound like other bands and stuff, but yeah, they do sound pretty unique. Yes, from just listening to this one album a few times. So then we go to the track Six Pounder. And what do you think of this one?
Yeah, it's great. It brings up they do more of a groovy hooks in this one. So but it's still ridiculously heavy, you know. But they definitely do show that they can groove and not just shred. And that's part of what hits, you know, I think that shows in this track.
Now, I think this would you say this song is about war? Did you look much into the lyrics?
This one I think is about war, but I don't know, like it's not very clear. It's not very specific, the lyrics. And I think in this case, you know, we see how it's more about the grooves and not about the words, you know? Because every time they go into the word war, they just say that, and then they go into like a groove with the guitar. And it's one of those ones where it's like, try not to headbang, you know? So I think people realize, okay, you have to have grooves and not just shredding. Like, you have to have those parts, you know, even in a band that's known for their shredding. Like, you have to, like, just jam out, you know, a little bit. And those are the hooks, though. Like, every song has hooks on a great record, whether it's a Beatles record or a Children of Bodom record, you know, and but they're not, like, just vocal hooks. Grooves are hooks as well.
Well, I guess the Six Pounder, the Six Pounder, the name is a weapon or a back in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't
But
realize that.
there's still like I don't know, did they have a video for this song? You know?
I actually do not know if
I thought I read somewhere where
video.
somebody said, like in the video, it's about abuse, but then somebody said, but the song's really about war. So that's why it's kind of hard to tell sometimes.
So, you know that, yeah, there is a video for it. And you know what's interesting? It's like, you know, this is so long ago that, you know, and these are European bands. So it's like, even bands I was like a super heavy fan of, I maybe didn't see the video as much. Whereas, like, if you're over in Europe, they would have been playing this on MTV. Although Headbangers Ball in America, what was left of it in the 2000s, like in the middle of the night on like MTV2, they would play this. They actually would be playing like Bodom and stuff.
Yes.
Like once they were popular enough to be like on Ozfest and stuff, you know, we'd get some Dimmu Borgir, some Bodom, and some of those things. But again, it was a different time, and it was like very hard. Like, you'd have to like wait for that specific time. So I don't really remember the video, but I secretly hate that when an artist makes a music video that doesn't have anything to do with the lyrics. Like, I want to know what the lyrics are about, and I want you to show me in film form. I don't want them to be separate art pieces. That's me being selfish.
Well, somebody said that the canon is a metaphor for abuse, but I don't know. That's what somebody said. But then
maybe, but I don't know. And unfortunately, Alexi's not around for us to ask anymore.
No.
So, yeah.
So then we go to the track Chokehold, and I guess it's Cocked and Loaded. I'm not sure what this one's about. I didn't find what this is about, but what do you think of this one?
You know, it's so funny because like they're Finnish, but they were so American, like in the way that they like, that sounds like a Five Finger Death Punch song title. You know what I mean? Like, and it could easily be, you know? And so, they, and it was so interesting because like they had a really American like vibe to them, even though they had like European elements in their music for sure. Only Europeans do the classical thing and do the keyboard shredding and stuff. I mean, I know Dream Theater's not European, but they're like an exception. They're not exactly played on American radio very much or anything. But these guys somehow integrated the Pantera vibe into all of that. There's like this groovy Pantera vibe, and like it comes across in lyrics like that in this song. And Alexi also would wear like camouflage shorts. That was his thing. Camouflage shorts and like cut off metal t-shirts. That was it. I mean, he looked like he could have been in an American band, you know. as far as that goes a little bit, you know. And so you know, they really somehow married those two things really well, like Pantera with like neoclassical metal. Don't know how they did it, but they did it. And this is one of those examples. And you can really see it reflected in the lyrics. Does not sound like a European band at all.
And that is the first track that I really noticed the keyboard and the solo that's on there. And
which is, you know, right. It's like American, like this, it's like, what a mesh, you know, they're really and that's why they're so unique. They brought like the grooves from the American metal and the from the European metal. And I've never seen a band really be able to do that. Usually Europeans like, and I think that's why they were able to cross over a little bit into America. There's still a lot of Americans that when they heard Bodom, when I used to work in a record store and I'd play Bodom, they'd be like, what the hell are those keyboards? You know, even the metal fans, because Americans, we just have our way of doing metal and Europeans just have their way of doing metal. And most of the time, never the twain shall meet. Even if we can be fans of both, like they don't cross over very well. Typically, right? I mean, even we can see that reflected in the draw, like on both sides of the aisle. And so that's fine and everything. But Bodom somehow managed to do it. And you can really see it in this track. And it's sort of like, how? I don't know how, but they did it.
Well, actually, my friend that burned me the CD for me to listen to them, he's a big Dream Theater fan too. So now I get the connection of why he liked it too, because of the keyboards and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
so
big time. This is one of the only bands with harsh vocals that a lot of progressive and power metal band fans will listen to. A lot of those people don't like screaming vocals and maybe wouldn't listen to another band in this category.
Yeah,
but they'll listen to this band. And it's for that reason.
Yes. Then we get to Bodom Beach Terror. I'll let you. What do you think of this track then?
This is my favorite one. I think on the album. It's really hard for me to pick a favorite, but I'm definitely gonna cover this one because it's summertime, and I think I've been thinking about it for a while. It's a hard song to do, so you have to it's really hard to do, and you got to be a really good screamer, and that's why I'm like, man, when I've been thinking about covering it, I'm like, I could never play the guitar. I can play the keys. I couldn't even play the keys of this song. I'm not good enough, number one. Number two, though, like, my God, like the screaming is so hard. Like I could only do the screaming for this song. And so it's just really, really challenging vocally. But what's really cool is this song is about, did you read what the band was about? Like how they got their name?
I did, but you can go ahead and say.
I don't really know exactly.
Oh, okay.
You might actually have the more details about from like the news of what it was, but right, these kids in Finland, what was like a camp, right, like a summer camp in the 90s called Camp Bodom or something, right? They went and they got murdered or something.
Yeah, supposedly, and as long as this is true, what I'm reading. It was called the Lake Bodom Massacre, and it happened in 1960, and there was 4 teenagers camping. 3 of them were murdered, and the other one was seriously hurt, but he didn't die. But they never found out who did it, and the survivor, whose name I'm not going to say, but he claimed that also claimed he saw death himself. I don't know what that means, but supposedly he was charged with murdering his friends, but was found not guilty on all charges. But it was like 2005 that he was, which was like 45 years later.
Wow.
But he was found not guilty on all charges, so they still don't know who did it if he didn't do it. But of course he would be the suspect if they all died except him.
Yeah, he's clearly the most obvious choice. But it's more fun to imagine that a monster came out of the water and killed the children of Bodom. And well, they really play on that. All of their album covers have their mascot was the Reaper. You know, they had a theme instead of Eddie. You know, they had a character, their own character, the Reaper. He was just faceless, guy with a Reaper. So I think they obviously played that off of the guy who, you know, said he saw death himself as well. And so the thing about it is, though, is this song is explicitly about that. So yes. I'm not sure. I actually would have to go back through the other albums. I'm not really sure if they wrote specific songs about that. And what's really interesting is, too, they ended it. I think the quote at the end is from the movie. I think it's from American Psycho.
Yes.
Yeah, right. So I think I always loved that too. How they put that quote in, and that you hear the Christian Bale like, "My pain is constant and sharp," and it's like kind of interesting because it's like are they insinuating that the guy did it? You know. I think that was really cool. And so the song's Bodom Beach Terror, but it's like, you know, it's incredibly hooky. It has a hooky chorus in the harsh vocals. The lyrics are hooks, and it's freaking awesome, and it's got great hooks, and it's such a great song. And it basically, you know, is like, you want to go to Bodom the beach, and we're gonna party all night, and then we're gonna die. It's kind of fun. So.
Yes. And then we go from that into a song called Angels Don't Kill. And this is probably, you mentioned about slowing down. I would assume you meant this song. This is probably the slowest one on the album.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the only one. And I think it's like the only one in their catalog. They really don't have anything like this.
Oh. Okay.
And again, it's where they bring out the, you know, it's probably just to give them something to breathe live, but it's one of their best songs. It's super great, where they just let the chord progression do the work. It's still an incredibly well-written song, well-written like chord progression, the way the notes are in order, and still has great soloing and shredding, ironically, for something that comes across almost like ballad-esque.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how they did it, but they did it. Everyone loves this song. And then what's really interesting is that melodic metal band that I was in, Helion Prime, we did like some special bonus tracks, and we actually did a cover of this song. So it's cool. It turned out very well. You know, it's a screaming cover. I didn't sing, so it was one of the only things that I screamed on with that band. They were pretty insistent on not having screaming, you know, being a power metal band, which is fine, because I wanted to do more singing just to kind of demonstrate that. But it has really turned out to be a nice cover, so that's out there if anybody wants to check that out. But that's a great, again, grooves and letting the ambience of a chord progression do the work, and maybe having a song where you don't have double kicks all the way through so your drummer doesn't pass out on stage, you know, is good. So they had to write one. But it's a great song. It's not filler at all. Everyone loves this track, even if they're like a light Bodom fan, you know.
Mm-hmm.
The girls always like this track, you know. It's a great one. So.
And yeah, the song's a little slower, but the guitar solos aren't, though. No.
They're not. They're not. They're definitely not. I was like, still somehow they ended up being able to shred, and somehow it works. It doesn't feel forced. But that's the importance of being just as good of a writer as you are a player. And then, again, just very rare to have this combination. So.
And then we go from Angels Don't Kill to Triple Corpse Hammer Blow.
That's like where you're like, okay, these guys are just ridiculous. See, a lot of people, I think you could still find these on YouTube. Back in the day, we would have to get them as DVDs, and then we would like watch them as a band and like worship them for weeks. Some of the DVDs that I used to worship was the Roadrunner United, the Chimera DVDs. I loved all of those. And but Bodom had DVDs like of their tour and like background stuff, and you could just see that they were goofy dudes. They partied really, really hard. The other thing like I couldn't believe is like how much they drank. Like, how can you also drink that much and play this well? Because they were that good live. They weren't slopping through the stuff at all. And you're just like, I don't get it. So there's so many things like that. It was like unbelievable. And they just were goofy, funny guys. And this is one of those songs where I'm like, I feel like they were just drunk. Like, yeah, triple corpses, hammers. We're just going to put it all together and triple it. You know?
Now, maybe this song is also about that Lake Bodom massacre because 3 people got killed, you know, triple corpse hammer blow.
That actually makes sense. That would
So
actually
I don't
make
know
sense.
if the person used a hammer or not, because it doesn't give me that details. But
it doesn't. But I do believe that could very. You know, they reference Lake Bodom in this song, so I think you're right. So, but again, another thing where that sounds like an American wrote the title. Yeah. That doesn't sound European.
And then,
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's connected to the next song, but the next song called "You're Better Off Dead," and I'm wondering, is that a reference to the guy that survived? Maybe
not. And it kind of flows, so I think it might be. Yeah.
Well, if he got accused of the crime, if he would have been guilty of it or whatever, then I guess that would come true where you're better off dead, right? But I don't know.
Yeah, because the whole rest of your life, you have to live with that now, people thinking that you did it, you know, so.
But the lyrics don't mention anything about this thing, so it might just be a coincidence as I'm reading in here, making up.
Yeah, it could just be another unrelated song, because I do feel like he wrote a lot about his life. It could have been him, too. I mean, sadly, you know, he had, like, a lot of, obviously, stuff that he was toiling with because he partied really hard, so... Yeah.
And he said one of the lyrics I wrote down is, "Did I ever hurt you in any way? If I did, then hear my apology. Fuck you."
Yeah. So, I mean, he's a character for sure, you know, so.
That could be like a suicidal tendency lyric right there, too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, some of it seems like American, like Pantera or something like that, like suicidal tendencies or something that would come out of the States. They're clearly influenced by all of that, for sure. Well, a lot of people don't know Alexi did one album with Impaled Nazarene, too. A lot of people don't know that. He was in some heavy stuff, and then he just was that kind of dude, you know, like, finger in the air, you know, kind of guy, you know, so, yeah.
And then we get to another kind of a weird title.
Yeah.
Little Blood Red Riding Hood.
Yeah. And that one, I'm like, I don't know where they got that from. You know, was that someone they knew? Was that a character they made up? You know, clearly about a woman, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't think I even have anything about the lyrics either, about what people thought the song was about. I think that was one that nobody even made any comments about what they thought.
It's like a love-hate kind of song about a woman, it seems, but it's very vague other than that, you know? Yeah. So, I don't know.
Oops.
Alexi was married for a while to a lady I actually kind of know, which is really cool. A really great singer. Her name is Kim Goss. And they actually had a power metal band together. And they were friends after they got divorced. So I don't think it was about her or anything. But and they did music together. They had this kick-ass power metal band called Synergy, where she was the singer. And it was way ahead of its time and amazing, if you ever get a chance to check it out. And she was a credible singer, like Nora from Battle Beast, but like 15 years earlier.
Yes.
And she's an American lady, and I've met her. She's come to some of my husband's shows, and like we follow each other on Instagram and stuff, and that's awesome because that was a huge vocal influence on me. I loved their records too, so she's cool. That's really cool. And she used to be the keyboard player in Dimmu Borgir. That's how they met.
Oh.
So interesting.
And then the album, well, there's a couple of bonus tracks that we can talk about if you want to, because on Spotify that they're on there, but I know noticed that's supposed to be on the Japan version was that, but I don't know about. But
Yeah,
anyway,
Japan always makes you have bonus tracks.
yeah. But anyway, that song ends with the title track, Hate Crew Deathroll. And so what do you think of that one? Finish it off.
Oh, great way to cap off a great album with the title track, right? And nonstop, just shred in your face, wrapping up the whole theme. Um, don't fade off with the hooks just because it's the end, you know, and that's crazy to me, because a lot of people just kind of put less effort, you know, into it, but it's great. They never did. They never let off, you know, just because they were at the end of the record or whatever. Every track hits the same. So, and they called themselves the Hate Crew. It was Children of Bodom Hate Crew. So this song was like their little anthem. And some of theirs, that's why they you know, some successful bands, they make themes for their fans, you know, like if the Maggots for Slipknot, and we have the, you know, and or a mascot like Eddie for Iron Maiden. So they had that. They had the Reaper was their mascot, and they had the Hate Crew was the fans. And a lot of their shirts, some of the ones I had said like COBHC, you know, Children of Bodom Hate Crew. And it was like their thing, you know, and this was sort of their like anthem for the fans. But you can see how that all tied together as part of their success. They had like a little universe that the fans could be a part of. It wasn't like super detailed like some bands, but it's there. And I think you need some of that, you know.
And I believe he had that tattooed on his hand or something. COB.
Something, yeah.
Yeah,
I think he did. Yeah, I think you're right.
And do you want to talk about the two cover songs? Because see, when I was on Spotify, since I knew nothing about, I didn't know any history of the band or the album, so it had somebody put something in my drink, and as I was listening to it, I'm thinking this doesn't sound like Children of Bodom song. I could tell it was a cover, but I wasn't sure if I've heard it before or not. But it's a Ramones cover. But what did you think of that version?
That's a fun version, and it works really well, surprisingly. You wouldn't think so, but it does. He did a good job.
Well, it sounded Motorhead-ish to me, too, when I was listening to it. But, of course, Motorhead was obviously influenced by the Ramones, too, or Lemmy was.
Yeah, and I think Alexi just had that dirty, gritty thing going on, even though he had, like, a very formal classical musician thing as well. And, he was just as much of like a let's get drunk and, you know, drink out of the bottle on stage, middle finger in the air, you know, Ramones type of guy, you know, as well.
And then they also had Silent Scream, which is a Slayer cover. And how did you like that version?
Oh, that's great. You know, I prefer like the heavier vocals personally, but yeah.
Yes, that was. Now, I usually we rate the albums. I know you might not be an album reviewer. Would you rate? Can you rate this one out of 10 if you were going to rate it?
10 out of 10. 10 out of perfect album.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised you said that. Yeah. Well, see, even for me, I've never listened to them before. Like I said, I mean, I'd give this an 8 or a 9 just from listening to it a few times just to prepare for this podcast.
That's huge. Yeah.
So I knew what we were talking about.
It's the hook.
And I might even check out some of the other albums now too after hearing this one. No.
Yeah, you might like them. You know, some of the people who like more, you know, it depends on what your taste is, you know, because if you can, some people like it when they lean heavier, some people like it when they lean more neoclassical. So it's kind of cool that you have a little bit of a gamut there to explore across their catalog. So yeah, it's cool.
Okay, so that's the album. Now, did you want to say anything about their other, like they have 10 studio albums? Would this be your favorite album?
This is my favorite. Yeah. Okay. It would take too long to go into all the other ones, but at the same time, this is still my favorite though. I do think this is the best one in their catalog personally. I know not everybody feels that way, but that's like the metal arguments forever. You get to sit around and debate each other about that, you know, but there's no right or wrong. So it's just my personal favorite, but I think it's probably their most commercially successful as well.
Okay. Now I do thank you for coming on my podcast. It was fun to talk to you and to hear your thoughts on this album and band.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was great. It was awesome.
And oh, I wanted to mention one thing for people that my friends that I know, some of them on the website. I just wanted to mention something that you said before. You said that your grandfather is from New Hamburg, Ontario. And I'm just going to mention that here so they can hear that, and because they'll be going, wow, it's only like a half hour from where I live. Anyway, we don't all live
born in a barn somewhere in 19 something, 15 or something. Because my parents were the youngest of their siblings, and so and then they didn't have kids till they were younger. And I'm already in my 40s. So, my grandpa was born a long, long time ago, close to the turn of the century, in a barn somewhere in the middle of Ontario. And so there we go.
But anyway,
back to Canada.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. Okay, so make sure you find Mary on YouTube, Voice Hacks. Oh, and she also has a podcast. It's kind of on hiatus, I guess you would call it right now, but there is a podcast, Voice Hacks Podcast, which is on Spotify and everywhere else, I'm sure. So check some of those out. She interviews some singers and bands. I know I listened to the one with Lauren Hart. I think that was like your first episode or your second episode or something like that.
It's one of the first three, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because I know Lauren a little bit, so it was cool to listen to that one. And
yeah, there's some.
And if you want to learn to sing, see Mary.
Well, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for having me today. Thank you so much, Blake.
Thank you, Mary. It was great to have you. And good luck to you. And I'll say thanks to everybody for listening. Make sure you check out our website, like I say, themetalpit.org, and we will talk to you next week.